Cabernet Sauvignon is considered by many to be one of the greatest of the red grape varieties. It's capable of producing these incredibly structured, complex and age-worthy wines. Now, Australia doesn't have quite the same long history with Cabernet Sauvignon as it does with Shiraz, maybe not even the same sort of geographic spread, but there are several areas growing Cabernet. Two we're going to look at are Margaret River and right here in Coonawarra. Now, what makes Coonawarra so famous? There are several aspects. The climate in general, the location, but one of the most important things are the famous Terra Rossa soil. Let's go have a look. One of the really important aspects to shaping the style and the characteristics of Coonawarra Cabernet are the famous Terra Rossa soils. These are 650,000-year-old soils. Better than having me explain it to you, though, I'm here with Wynn's Coonawarra winemaker Sue Hodder. Sue, let's talk dirt, shall we?
Certainly, Mark. Any discussion about Coonawarra always centres around the highly prized Terra Rossa soil. And you can see here that it is in distinct layers. And in this case, we have the red clay loam, which is quite shallow, and it's over the limestone. And you can also see how the limestone is very soft because this vine root has managed to burrow down through the fissures to look for the water.
So the water's how far down?
Water table varies, but it can be as shallow or as close to the surface as between 4 and 6 metres, depending on the season and other factors.
So these guys know it's there and they're just trying to get down.
Yes,
down
they are.
It,
so. And you can see that the soil depth is very shallow, but the vines don't seem to suffer. They're very healthy looking vines up here. And that's because the Terra Rossa soil has just the right combination of fertility and drainage for the production of highly concentrated Cabernet Sauvignon grapes.
Now, it's not just the soil that gives Coonawarra its specific flavour. What about the climate in Coonawarra? I mean, how does that affect it?
It's a combination of the various growing characteristics for grapevines in Coonawarra, and the soil forms the basis of that, but the mild climate, which is influenced by the cool southerly ocean, certainly plays an important role in the formation of the flavours that are so distinctive in Coonawarra.
Probably the most filmed trench in the wine business, would you think?
Oh yes, well it is. It's highly prized, as I said, and very special, and it really is the essence of Coonawarra.
Great, let's get in and taste some. Blending's a really important part of winemaking, but for some reason the term makes people uncomfortable. They think of it as something inferior. Now, when it comes to Cabernet Sauvignon, a historic blending partner has been Merlot. But here in Coonawarra, they actually very rarely use that in the final blend of their wines. However, that doesn't mean they don't blend. And here at Wynn's, they actually set up a blending tasting for consumers, which is kind of what you're going to do for me here today, Sue. So explain how you would structure this.
Yes, so we have 3 different Cabernet Sauvignon wines, each of which have different tastes or characteristics that contribute to the overall blend. So we can vary the proportions depending on what we want the final wine to taste like.
So this is something, obviously, you're blending probably from more than 3, I'm gathering, when
yes.
You're in the real lab, not for the consumers.
Certainly, so. Mark, we can have up to 80 different component wines from different vineyards, different oak types, different winemaking variables that go into the final blend.
Possible permutations are probably a bit confusing at times, I'm guessing, for you, but...
Yes, it is, but that's what we do, and we're lucky to have the luxury of so many different parcels from wonderful old vineyards. So it gives us great scope.
So let's try something. I'm keen to make my own sort of Coonawarra, the Dr. Davidson Coonawarra blend.
Yes, all right. So the first wine is a wine from the Central Terra Rossa, and we describe this wine as having great fruit lift, nice cherry character. It's full on the palate, good structure and good potential for ageing.
Okay.
But
so it's sort of like the backbone of the wine?
Correct.
Okay,
and
great.
we can layer it up with different wines. So
beautiful. Well, I'm going to take, if I'm going to do the
Rightio.
backbone, I'm actually not going to tell you what my blend is because I don't want you to learn anything special.
No, and if yours is better than mine, I've got some serious soul searching to do.
Where's your blend? Let me have a taste.
Rightio.
That's yours?
Yes.
I'll take a little bit on.
Okay, yes.
You can have a look at mine.
Actually, I do have a few improvements that are
Do you?
needed. Yes, I'll acknowledge that up front.
I think your experience is showing.
Your blend is very aromatic and lifted.
Lifted,
yes,
which is what I was hoping to
that's
achieve.
right. Sure. No, and bearing in mind that there's a little bit more finessing that can be done before it goes to bottle. No, I think you have potential.
Now, if you were to sort of say there's a couple of key characteristics that typifies, not specifically your wine here at Wynns, but the Coonawarra flavour, what is that, do you think? What are the key?
I think
mint is one of them.
Yes,
Yeah.
and a cherry or cassis character,
Right.
which is a hallmark of good Cabernet Sauvignon. And then, of course, it's about the structure and texture of the wine. They're usually medium-bodied wines that have a real presence, and you can tell that they'll age gracefully. Now, that's not to say these wines can't be consumed young. They can be, and mostly they are, and that's great. But there are many Coonawarra Cabernets that will age very well for up to 50 years.
Well, it's funny sort of being it's simply a sterile place to be tasting wine in a lab, but let's face it, the lab is a really important piece of any winery puzzle in the sense that this is where your quality control is done. And, I mean, you have to make sure everything that is going out to the customer properly. But
We do, and we wouldn't be doing justice to our vineyards if we mucked it up at this stage, if you like. It's quality control. We need to do the various tests to make sure that the flavours can truly express themselves and that we're capturing the essence of the vineyards in the bottle.
Well, fantastic! What a great day this has been in Coonawarra. It's kind of given me a real sense of the place and just exactly how you craft the wines. Thank you very much. Cheers. Here's to Coonawarra Cabernet.
Thank you, Mark.
Now, even though I'm quite critical of the old wine and food pairing rules, there is one that I typically don't break, and that's the red meat and red wine rule. Why does this work? Well, the tannin in some red wines, like Cabernet Sauvignon for example, can be neutralised by protein and fat, therefore complementing something like a nice steak or a piece of cheese. That doesn't mean you shouldn't experiment with those wines, but if you're thinking Australian Cabernet Sauvignon, a safe bet would be a thick-cut, juicy, grilled ribeye steak, and maybe even polish off the bottle with a nice piece of firm cheese. I guess some of those rules really aren't meant to be broken. One of the truly famous wines of Australia is the Cullens Madeleine Cabernet Merlot. In fact, the 2001 was so famous, It's now recommended in the book of 1001 wines you must drink before you die. And, Vanya, we're in the vineyard where it comes from. So these are the actual vines that go into the famous Diana Madeleine.
Yeah, these beautiful old vines. They were planted in 1971 and they're grown with biodynamic techniques. You can see the soils are all open. Just walking down there, you notice the soil was really spongy. And it's just a way to have the vines grow naturally with their own balance. They're old vines. They have Margaret River is very suitable for Cabernet Sauvignon. And look at them, they're such good looking sort of bunches of grapes, aren't they, and plants. And they're very healthy and they make great wine year in, year out. And that sustainability, once again, is about the health of the soil and the plant. And I always think Mum would be pleased with that.
Yeah, I should imagine so. And that wine, the famous wine, the Diana Madeleine, named after your mum, it's predominantly Cabernet. It says Cabernet Merlot on it, but it's predominantly Cabernet, right?
Yeah, the blend does vary, but it is predominantly Cabernet Sauvignon, yeah. And they're all on a trellis, which you can see, which exposes the berries to sunlight, and it just, gives you lovely sort of, what typifies this site is the dark fruits. And I think, that elegance that Cabernet Sauvignon can produce in Margaret River so well.
Well, you can definitely feel the maritime influence today. A little bit of rain, a little bit of sun, but certainly breezy, and that's the kind of typifies the region, doesn't it?
It does, and it gives, we've got these open trellises that give that airflow, and it's those, those sea breezes which give the temperate maritime influence and make it cooler. So it's, otherwise it could at times be warm. You have the easterlies in the morning and then the sea breezes in the afternoon. So that's very typical of this climate, is to have that wind and that air movement.
Well, should we get out of this climate and go and actually try the wine? That would be fun.
Yeah, that'd be fun. Always, yes.
That's good.
So we can taste the 2001 Diana Madeleine.
Fantastic.
After looking at the vines. 2001 was a very good vintage for us for Cabernet. It sort of shows all those characters I was talking about in the vineyard of the wonderful black currant, and you can really taste the fruit and the flower and the earth in this wine. I think it's got that sort of lovely minerality to it and that sense of place.
Wow, it's fantastic. It's got that sort of slightly dusty, gravelly kind of...
You can taste the earth, can't you?
Let me say it's got years ahead of it, and I can see that, but it's pretty delicious right now at the same time. And you really do pick up that flower element. I mean, there's lots of that sort of earthy, sort of gravelly thing, but there's a lovely lifted floral component in here that's extremely charming. Really, really nice wine.
I think Cabernet Sauvignon should be medium-bodied and elegant, and that doesn't mean that it doesn't age, but it gives it that definition of a wine which is in balance.
It's so funny when you talked about Cabernets being sort of a medium-bodied wine, and people just have under this impression it's this monstrous big wine, and really the great Cabernet-based wines of the world, to me, are actually elegant and sort of more medium-bodied than they are smack you around the head and fall.
Yeah, and I think that elegance is what defines it. It defines the style and the greatness of the wine. And the quality of the tannins really are what make the quality of the wine. And if you have that, ripeness there and then the fruit, it's just like all falls into place. We have the vines on what's called a Scott Henry trellis, which exposes the bunches to sunlight at set. And that starts the ripening process, which gives you the fine tannins. It's all happening out in the vineyard, and the trellising with the biodynamics really gives that extra edge of finesse and balance and connection to the earth, and in a way which is good for the earth too. It's sort of like you're giving back what you take out.
Lovely wine, very balanced.
Very silky, isn't it? It's got a length to it that you don't always find in Cabernets, but it's that silkiness and length and that core of dark fruits in the middle. It's thought of as, not such a friendly variety, but if you get the fruit ripe, it's just such an appealing wine.
In the end, even the really upper tier ones represent tremendous value. I mean, you could certainly argue that of all the places that grow great Cabernet in the world, Australia, Margaret River, Coonawarra, it's really a fantastic deal. Even the top wines going all the way down to sort of the entry-level wines, it really is not inexpensive.
You know, if you look at say a first growth Bordeaux, you can be paying, 1,500. I think wines like this are very, very drinkable and very friendly, and I think that's what Australia does very well with Cabernets. It makes those wines which are classic but are drinkable at a reasonable price.
Yeah, no, it's fantastic. This is a really remarkable wine. I can see why it's in the book of 1001 wines that you must drink before you die, so I can tick that one off. And this was your mother's favourite and it was named after her?
Yeah, this was the first wine that was named after Mum, and it was, she always thought it was going to be a great wine, so, and it is, so she was right, as always.
Well, here's to your mother, and here's to Margaret River Cabernet, delicious stuff. I'm at Cape Mentelle Vineyards with winemaker Rob Mann. Now, Rob Mann's grandfather, Jack Mann, was a legendary Cabernet maker. He's so legendary they've named a wine after him at Hortons. So there's a bit of a Cabernet tradition in the family. So Rob, I barely recognise you with the furry face. What's that? Is that a vintage thing?
Yeah, it's a vintage thing. It's a tradition to not shave until the vintage is finished.
And so your grandfather made some famous wines at Hortons, your father grows Cabernet, and now you're just keeping on the family tradition.
Yep. And my grandfather's father before him, so it's a crazy family of Cabernet devotees.
Why is Margaret River so special in terms, I mean, it's relatively new in the scheme of Cabernet growing in Australia, yet it pretty much takes equal billing as Coonawarra, which has a much longer history and reputation, so why so good here?
Well, this region was established because of its potential to make Cabernet. So in work done in the late 50s and early 1960s identified Margaret River as having similar climatic and soil characteristics to Bordeaux, and based on that it was thought it would produce wines in a similar style to that of Bordeaux, and it's proven to be the case, with Cabernet being the #1 variety from Margaret River. The region runs only 20 kilometres inland and 90 kilometres from top to bottom, and within that there's probably 100 producers, all producing distinctly different wines based on the combinations of soil and microclimates. It's local climate really, very close to the ocean. It has a strong moderating effect on the climate, being so close to the Indian Ocean, and it has some very ancient gravelly soils which permit free draining, and Cabernet loves free draining soil, so the climate and the soil that ultimately produce wines with a great deal of distinction.
Mm-hmm. And is there a particular flavour? I know there's different parts and sub-regions to Margaret River, but if you're talking about the heart of Margaret River and a flavour profile of Cabernet, is there one?
With the many different sub-regions, different characters, but we typically see in the best expression of Margaret River a lovely structure. If it's too warm, you don't get the quality of tannin. If it's too cool, the flavours and structure can be on the greener side. It really needs to find that perfect medium to achieve an even palate and length that comes with growing the variety in a climate well suited to it. We typically see in the best expression of Margaret River a lovely structure. If it's too warm, you don't get the quality of tannin. If it's too cool, the flavours and structure can be on the greener side. It really needs to find that perfect medium to achieve an even palate and length that comes with growing the variety in a climate well suited to it. And around that structure, the classic Cabernet characters of dark fruits, cassis, a touch of mint, aniseed, really fresh, vibrant fruit, but it's fundamentally down to structure with Cabernet as to why it does so well here.
What would be the first choice of a plate of food?
Well, it would be regionally based, so this region is traditionally a lot of beef and dairy, so the beef is fantastic. We also have a lot of local venison or lamb, so lots of red meats to choose from. More recently there's some people producing some local ducks, lots of interesting little things to try and explore around the place, and a lot of them complement the wine of the region very well.
You could probably argue that quality Cabernet from Australia may be the best value Cabernet around the world, actually. What do you think of that?
Yes, well, it's certainly on a world scale. The top Cabernets from Australia are relatively inexpensive. When you compare the top wines of Australia to first growths from Bordeaux, you're talking 1/5 the price. They offer amazing value for money, even at the top end. And then when you come into the more value-priced wines, tremendous value for money. So it's very unique in that perspective from a world scale.
So your granddad said that he thinks Cabernet was the only grape that's going to be tolerated in heaven. Is that what?
I think he thought if he had to drink anything when he was up in heaven, it had to be a good bottle of Cabernet.
Its reputation may have been made by the famous wines of Bordeaux and certainly augmented by the rich wines of Napa Valley, but Australian Cabernet Sauvignon has history, quality and character written all over it, and you don't need to pay an arm and a leg for a top shelf version of one. So whether it be the rich mint tone flavours of Coonawarra or the beautifully balanced aromatic style of Margaret River, I think Australian Cabernet Sauvignon may very well be the best value Cabernet Sauvignon in the world, and I'm willing to cheers to that.